or things maybe communication maybe doesn't come as naturally to you as it would in your hometown, in your home
Mm.
country. So it's always about like finding ways to communicate, and it has a lot to do with our work as well, how to communicate things.
When you want to associate two words or two concepts, your mind creates a sort of mnemonic trick. So it's like a trick of the memory.
Yeah.
And I use this technique a lot to remember to learn new words in a foreign language. And I recently started to draw them. It's more efficient for me to draw them because then my mind also associate like a sort of photography memory that image, and it makes me remember the word I want to learn.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think you can do that because if you're learning a new language, you don't have a lot of associations with new words because they're completely new to you. So you can see a word in a very natural way and make new
Yeah,
associations for yourself without having any type of association with it. And
yeah,
that actually really reminds me of like wordplay as well, or puns. If you think about certain words and try to see them as like completely neutral, it's easier to associate them with different meanings, or think about
yeah,
rhyming them, or think about how they sound like something else, instead of thinking about, oh, this is a word I already know and there's nothing
yeah.
else to it.
It is like a playful approach, almost like a child, that maybe you repeat the same word a couple of times and then you realize, oh, it sounds like something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how do you come up, how do puns, where does it start from? Is it something that do you, okay, let me phrase it better. When you create a pun and then
Mhm.
you illustrate it, does it start from the specific word that maybe you already found funny or interesting, or you know where you want to go and you find a way to go there?
I don't actually know. I think it happens kind of quickly. I'm now thinking about the last couple of puns that I did, which was actually for your sticker class,
Yeah.
because I had so much fun making stuff for that. So I wanted to do a little collection of stickers or animations, really basic animations of animals. So I started with that. I gave myself a little brief, like a bit of like a limit, right? Otherwise, like you can do anything. So I just went and looked around on Google. I just Googled animal puns. I mean, I saw a couple that I really liked, made a selection, and then came up with a couple of new ones that I thought were funny myself,
Mhm.
and then just immediately connected those with animals. That's a pretty easy
Yeah.
way to do it because you've got, for example, a really common one is seal of approval, which is a little like a seal, but also like the animal, a seal, for
Yeah.
example. Pretty simple. Another one that is a little bit less of an association could be like Happy Hump Day. Hump Day is a Wednesday, usually in the week, middle of the week. But an animal you can associate with humps is, for example, a camel that has like humps on the back. So it kind of depends. Sometimes it's an easier association, sometimes it's a bit further away.
Yeah.
But I think puns are so easy because you've got visuals and text to then connect your idea, and that makes it super easy to understand. So even if a pun might be kind of difficult at first to understand, or difficult only in text to
Mhm.
understand, it's really easy to connect them and make them understandable if you've got both text and visuals to
Yeah.
help you out.
It's self-explanatory. You mean the moment you connect the visual with the word, it's like
Exactly. And that
you
makes
don't
it
need
really easy
extra.
to come up with your own puns too, because most of the time they're gonna work. Yeah, it's pretty easy. And I really like working that way. I just like to keep things funny and simple. Puns are just a really nice way to do that.
Yes.
So yeah.
And I guess when you approach a client job, let's say a blackboard, there you would start maybe from the word. If they, let's say they have tacos on the menu, then you would use, okay, what can I create with the word tacos?
Exactly. That's how that
And
started.
yeah,
And sometimes it's not always puns either, because here, like, English puns are not going to translate into Spanish. So sometimes I'm not working with puns, but it's always going to be lettering focused. It's going to be letters and visuals together. Sometimes it's going to be humor. There's going to be humor involved. Sometimes there isn't, but you're always trying to find a way to connect your letters, your text that you're starting with to visuals somehow, and making that
Yes.
cohesive, making that work together, whatever the message is.
Here you go back also to composition. You just said connect the words with the image. Maybe it's not through humor, maybe it's not through a pun, but it could be in the composition. They are connected, they are
Yeah,
cohesive.
exactly.
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting with a chalkboard, or you start with your surface and your text because they give me a certain surface, then you really have to think about composition, because you don't just start with any kind of canvas that you like. You have like either a very weird shape or something that it has to work within that shape. You cannot really change anything. So you really have to
Yes.
think about where things go and kind of adjust the amount of text or the visuals completely depending on the literal borders that you're working with. So that's when composition is the most important thing above anything else.
And even more, I think, when you work analogically, so you are not able to just draw it in the middle and then move it around and look for the best. You really have to think it in advance and plan your
Prepare. Yeah,
composition. Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
But I
Mm.
mean, I love working digitally as well because it gives you a lot more freedom. And now, as with my day job, I mostly do graphic design, and there's a lot more text involved, a lot more languages, a lot of translation, and that requires a lot of composition. But luckily, I can just redo and undo if I need to on the
Mm.
computer, which is good. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a question
Hmm.
about, I'm wondering, we talked a lot about moving to another country and English and local languages, but I'm wondering what's your relationship with your own mother tongue, or is there room in your work for Dutch?
It's a really good question. So far, very, very little. I don't really use it at all. I think because it's such a small language, it's just not spoken a lot. And I think it's more about, I think what I bring to my own work now, more cultural than the language itself. I think
Yeah.
that it's just a sort of like minimalist design. Historically, the Netherlands has that as well. If you think about like Bauhaus and Mondrian and like the primary colors and all of that, just a lot of minimalist stuff, that has definitely inspired my work. But language, not really, because I feel like
Hmm.
I'm not really able to connect to other people in that way if I use certain words. I've played with it
Mm.
before, but then it's something that I can't really connect to a lot of other people. It would only be picked up by Dutch people, really, and that's it, people who speak the language. What about you? Because your mother
I
tongue is
feel,
Italian, right?
yeah,
Mostly. Do you use that in
yes.
your work a lot?
I think for writing, I think this is an interesting also topic. Like when you move abroad and you speak more than one language, more than your mother tongue, sometimes I think your vocabulary becomes very, for each language is different. So it becomes like a sort of field vocabulary or like specific vocabulary in the sense that I feel very comfortable in speaking in English about my work, but I didn't have a lot of chances, let's say, to pitch project or a film or to write a deck in Italian, let's say,
Yeah,
or in another language. So I think in that sense, every language is has its own fit, has its own role, kind of in your everyday life.
yeah.
But I feel I've been writing a lot since ever, and sometimes now I just write in English, but some other times I like to go back to my mother tongue and to write in Italian. I feel like luckily still I have a little more vocabulary there, even if sometimes you feel like you don't find the word. So I enjoy still writing in Italian at times, or brainstorm in Italian and then maybe later translate it into English.
Hmm.
So in that sense, yes. But I do feel, yeah, that every language for me has its own role, really. For example,
You can express yourself differently in different languages.
yeah, because you use languages for different things.
Yeah,
For all the admin stuff here, all the taxes and stuff is in German. If I go to the supermarket, usually it's in German. But then when you talk with clients, it's in English. So there is, I think, kind of boxes or drawers
yeah,
for each language.
right.
There is a different, yeah. Now, I wanted to ask if it's the same for you, that you have different languages for
Absolutely.
different things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Work for me at the moment is mostly it's my job here. It's completely Spanish, 100%. At the moment, I'm actually working on something where, because it's a national project, there's also Galician, there's Valencian, there's Basque, all these languages that I have an understanding of, but I mean, Basque is really difficult, it's really different. But luckily, I don't need to touch that too much, but I'm working with these languages directly. And then with at home and with friends, it's mostly English. Some work as well, international clients is also English. And then for me with Dutch, it's just family and a few friends.
Yeah,
And I think when you have those in separate boxes, what you said about expressing yourself, and I think the way that the language, what you use, how it evolves, it is in that direction, right? For me,
mm,
Spanish is a lot of work related stuff and government related stuff too.
yeah,
I know how to say everything about design in Spanish, but then very personal things or emotional things, I would express myself in English or in Dutch for that.
yeah. That's very true and interesting to think about it.
Before we talked about more about language and how that kind of influenced the kind of stuff that we were doing. And I was definitely subconsciously very a sort of inspired by languages when I got here. I completely forgot about this, but this is what I made for my end of masters, like in a final project, which was about how to basically set up a project for a book publication or a magazine
Mm,
publication. And I love symbols and everything about how people interpret colors and shapes, because that's really important. And if you're doing anything visual, right? Like what kind of colors are you using and stuff like that. And I used to do collage a lot, which I love. So I wrote sort of like a small like encyclopedia about, here you can see it's like collages
mhm.
and then shapes, colors, parts of the body, stuff like that. I wrote in English, but it's different languages. So I don't know if you could see.
Yeah,
I really hope I can put it in front of the camera the right way. I wanted to find a way to connect, like, or translate words in different languages. Like, I included Spanish and then what was it, German and French, I think, just to kind of show like how languages and symbolism are connected. And the idea was like that the book was could be a tool for designers to be able to use when they're thinking about what kind of colors do we associate with this, or what kind of shapes are we going to use? What did they actually mean, like historically? Where did it come from? And all of
mhm.
this is just like Western philosophy. Like that's the only thing I took because otherwise there's too many things to include.
Yeah,
But I mean, if you could take that even further, like different colors have different associations and different cultures, right? Like that. I find that fascinating.
yes.
It has a lot to do with
Eh,
language as well.
yeah, and it is also interesting and fascinating to think that you were a foreign student and you decided to make your master project about that, about the topic of today, basically connecting images with words.
Yeah,
It's fitting today's topic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
You must be really something that as an expat or like someone who moved to another country, it is kind of always in the back of your mind.
yeah. It has to be, right? You're always thinking of things, maybe communication maybe doesn't come as naturally to you as it would in your hometown, in your home
Mm,
country. So it's always about like finding ways to communicate, and it has a lot to do with our work as well, how to communicate things.
oh yeah.
So you talked about how you express yourself in Italian. Would you ever want to make something more personal as an animation that includes Italian, or more about just the best way that you can express yourself?
Yes, ideally I would like to make animations in Italian. It's actually a good question because I have a project now in my drawer that I would like to develop, which is based on a recording of my mom reading a poem that she wrote.
Yeah.
And I would like to make it for this year because it's her 70th birthday. I would love to animate it and gift it
Yeah.
to
Wow.
her. But at the same time, I feel like if I make an animation in Italian, and especially if it's very much text driven like a poem, it will have less chances in festivals or in general for the distribution of the film, because usually short films, they don't have big chances to be seen. They are selected in a couple of festivals and that's it, until then a couple of years later you publish them online.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a little extra obstacle for an animation if there is a language which is, in this case, Italian, not so broadly spoken. Maybe it could be selected in a couple of Italian festivals,
Mm.
but if I want to reach a broader audience, and especially in animation, since you dedicate so many efforts, years sometimes, you want to reach as many people as possible. I feel like
Yeah.
it's a little pity to restrict yourself with the language. And
Yeah.
I noticed this myself when visiting film festivals, and I visit a lot of them. It's a little annoying to know that you're going to have one chance to watch a film and you have to pick, you have to decide, will I enjoy the graphics, or will I read the subtitles, or will I go crazy and not enjoy anything at all?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, also why usually I tend to make animations without dialogue. So yeah, in general, I would love to use more my language, because it is true, it's more personal.
Yeah.
But then I feel like it's less reachable for everybody.
That's a shame. It is definitely very important to try to reach as many people as possible and to limit yourself in such a way would just be an extra obstacle. I agree. But I think it's also such a shame that we, for our own benefit, have to exclude parts of our own culture, I guess. I think I just realized that
Sure.
when you asked me about like, have you included Dutch? And I was thinking, no, why haven't I? It's such a shame, but
Mm,
because it is part of who I am, and I'm not able to really do that because I mean, I'd be limiting myself like crazy. Like, what's the point? It's already hard
yeah.
enough. I cannot even imagine how much time it costs to make animations from scratch. It's an obstacle.
I mean, it depends, I think, what's your priority or what's the goal of that specific product,
Right.
what's your audience. Like I have some friends who made films, let's say, about mafia, and they want to share it with an Italian audience, then you
Mm.
go for it. Then there's also the option to, which is usually more expensive, but to have a double version. So maybe you have Italian version and you have English version
Right.
of a film. So there are possibilities, of course, but I notice myself as part, for example, of a pre-selection team for a festival, that it is coming into the decision making of the pre-selection team if there is it's a heavy dialogue film or not, because it's going to take away the attention from the actual film and the shots,
Yeah.
and yeah, and bring the audience all the time to the bottom to read the subtitles. And I found myself even commenting and saying, well, it will be a very good film, but you have to read. It's not like one sentence here and there, it's a constant monologue,
Yeah.
and you just don't watch the film.
Mhm.
Again, because usually in festivals you have the chance to watch it once and that's it, and then you lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you missed the opportunity to watch it again.
Mm.
So yeah, it is a pity, but it's also, I think, a matter of priority. You can decide as a creative or a director, what do I want for this film? Do I want it? Is it important to share it in my language? Can I maybe have a second version?
Yeah.
Maybe also for you, maybe can you make a pun that works both in English and in Dutch?
Right. Hmm. Haven't found one yet, but I'll keep looking.
Mm. Yeah, you don't make Dutch puns.
No, no, not really, but it might be worth giving it a try.
Mm.
But yeah, that's a good one. I was thinking before of just like how sometimes it can feel a little bit, and it might just be social media, that a lot of people that we're sort of subconsciously moving towards liking the same things. I mean, obviously in design there are trends. In art there are certain trends that we gravitate towards or things that we like at the moment, and then, ebbs and flows, right? We go towards different things. But I feel like with the world globalizing, we're sort of liking more and more of the same things altogether. And it becomes almost like less personal and more about just what works for people right now, what people gravitate towards. I noticed
That's a
that
good
definitely
point.
with specifically graphic design, or fonts or typography. Like there are certain things that are just in right now that in a few years we'll look back at that and be like, oh, that was very like 2024 that we were doing that. That's hilarious. And
Mm.
then we'll go to something else. And I feel like that's becoming more and more just like one big thing instead of different cultures having their own input, maybe. I don't
Mhm.
know if that's true. I'm just thinking of like that's kind of what I'm seeing at the moment a little bit.
I think that's definitely an interesting point, and I would say I see it also in animation. Maybe there are some styles or some techniques that are trendy, but I would say for sure that's something important. The visual is 50% of the product, and in a way, it's also good that it's kind of trendy, so people are attracted to it. But
Hmm.
I also feel that in a film specifically, then there is another 50%, which is the content. So maybe there you have the space to bring your own story, your own culture. So that could be the personal and unique side.
Mm,
If you still want to follow the trends and you are inspired and influenced by that.
yeah. As long as there's a way for you to put your own context there, right? Like your personal
Yeah.
touches. Maybe that's more possible in the more the art sphere towards animation, a bit more than I'm thinking a lot of like brand illustrations, right?
Mm.
And like
Yeah.
brand design, which is what I'm kind of in now. That's most of what I do at the moment. And that can very much be about what is trendy right now, what do people gravitate towards. So
Yeah.
that's what we're using. It's less
But
personal, more about, you know,
in that case, I found it even harder because you have the client, right, asking for something, and usually the client is just looking around what's trendy, what's working, they want that. And in order for you to be able to propose something else, you would have to build a very strong personal style or personal
true.
signature style, so that you would say, okay, I know that this is the trendy thing at the moment, and maybe
Hmm.
you would like that because you client usually they don't have a very deep understanding of the market, or they just want what's working. But the moment you are kind of a name, or you have your own signature style, and there you could bring something from your culture, etc.,
That's
then
true.
maybe. But it is much harder because, as I just said, you have to convince them then that the trendy thing is good, but you have a better option.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
You have to be very strong in your own your personal style, right? And that can, yeah, I agree, that can definitely differentiate from what is trendy at the moment. But then it takes all the more convincing. And hopefully, if you're big enough, you can just attract clients that really want you for your work. The kind of stuff that
Yeah.
you, instead of having to
Yeah.
convince someone like, no, don't worry, this is better.
Yeah, but everyone starts at the bottom. So in order to get there, I think you have to go through this phase where you impose your style or say, I know you would like this, but what about that?
Yeah,
But it
that's a
is
good point.
it is more difficult, of course. And usually with a client project, you tend to just go for what they want to
Yeah,
do. Yeah,
that's true.
yeah, to get it done.
The first time that we talked and mentioned like that you mentioned like, oh, I'm actually from Italy and I moved up north. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I lived up north and I moved down south. For me, when I think about cultural differences here, they have a lot more less to do with the country and more about south versus north in
Yeah.
terms of mentality, in terms of working,
Mhm.
in terms of how to talk to people. And that just reminded me of like, oh, we actually made the opposite switch. And I'm wondering if that perspective for you is the same. Like, do you feel like Italy, Switzerland has a bit of like a north versus south mentality
Yeah.
sometimes? Yeah.
Definitely, yes. I mean, for sure, less than Italy, north of Germany where I was before.
Oh, right.
But yes, I think so. But even if I have to say I appreciate Zurich in general, but Switzerland because it's not too far from Italy, so I can find something also culturally that is quite close. It's
Yeah.
not just geographically close, so it takes less time to go home, but it's
Yeah.
also, I feel like in the food or in the culture, it's not too far, but
Yeah.
definitely a
That's
little
funny.
northern, yes. Mhm.
That just proves my point. There is a difference, and it's really funny how the further south you go geographically, at least in Western Central Europe, you go very Mediterranean, very much just a different way of doing things sometimes in
Yeah.
certain things. I've noticed that with work. And then the more north you go, the more different it is
And
in terms
also
of,
for the
yeah,
social interactions as well.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
this I feel it a lot here, even when I meet other people from Italy or even from Spain. We found each other much faster because we have this
Hmm.
common ground, like this common cultural ground.
That's funny. Yeah, I have the same thing here that sometimes I connect with people from the north a bit more because we see each other. We're both looking very awkward. We're like, hello, like we connect with each other a bit
Yes.
easily because we're all a little bit socially awkward. So it's just
Yes.
a way to
Yeah.
social communication that's a little bit similar. Yeah,
I think so. And I think as we are in like a mirrored position, and we probably appreciate also something that is local, but also something that we bring from home and kind of blend them together and find a good balance.
absolutely. I
Mm.
gravitate towards how people are here with each other because I'm learning so much from that. Like it helps me in every way. Definitely a blend of what you bring yourself and the influence you get from where you are. What did you think about our chat today?
I think it was very nice. I learned even more about you that I knew before. And I think it's
Likewise.
so, yeah, and it's really nice. I find always interesting to talk with another creative in a similar situation because we do share something in common, but at the same time, you can see the same situation from a different perspective, which is quite enriching. I feel it was very interesting for me, and
Mm,
hopefully, it's going to be interesting also for some other creatives in a similar situation to
yeah,
listen to.
I hope so.
I'm not even sure I can pronounce this, but this is basically clones of clowns. Yeah, and having those, it just works for me probably, but I think that when you try to learn a language or just to remember some concept,
Hmm.
playing with the word and creating, in this case, just a small sketch helps the memory, at least for me, it helps greatly to then, yeah, connect the image with the thought.